in this lesson, we'll use Sculpt Layers to add some rocky detail. So let's jump into Mudbox. And I want to subdivide this one more time. So we're now up into the millions of polygons. Let's also go to the Layers tab, and you can see this is the base geometry that we're working with if we're under Sculpt Layers. So right now we don't have any Sculpt Layers, and so all the information that we are sculpting in is being baked right into the mesh itself. So at this point, I just want to come in and just make sure that any detail that I add is something that is going to be one kind of symmetrical, and I don't want anything really along the surface as far as like a high-res rocky kind of detail. We want larger scale details, okay, in this case. So I'm just going to maybe spend a little bit of time up here on the shoulder just detailing this, which is not really associated with the kind of large scale rocky texture that I want to create. And so once I get that, now I want to come in and add kind of large rocky cliff-like detail across the surface. But I don't know exactly how I want it to look, and so I want to put it on a layer so that I can turn it off, or I can dial down the intensity, or I can erase it and not use it at all if I don't like it. So in order to do that, we can come up here and we can hit this little button here for creating a new layer. We can hit this little arrow, and you can see that you have the ability to create a new layer or a new group. We don't have any layers yet, so let's just create a single group. A single layer. So we'll create a new sculpt layer. You can see it located here. Its strength is at 100%. So now whatever we sculpt is going to be associated with whatever layer that we have selected. So let's take our sculpt, and I want to grab this second vector displacement map. So you see this grouping of 5. I want to grab the second one over, and then I'm going to turn off symmetry. Now let's see what this looks like. So you can see if I go left to right, it's creating a ridge where the backside is blending in with the surface, and we have a nice sharp ridge on the front. That's left to right. If I undo that and I go now right to left, it's creating it in the other direction. So that's good to know. I want a lot of the cliff faces to come this way, but sometimes I want them to go the other way. So with that selected, let's get kind of a larger brush size, and I'm going to increase the strength. And then I just want to come in and experiment a little bit with these sort of cliff-like details. So I'm going to come down here and maybe come across, and I don't want it to be symmetrical. I can come back in along the back and kind of smooth that out. Now if I want to start here and kind of come up along the surface there, maybe come down a little bit from left to right this time. Okay, and maybe coming in across here. Let's do the same thing up here. So come in and start to add a little bit of that detail coming across. And you could do the same thing up here. And if you did want it to be symmetrical, then you could certainly do that, and they would be the same on both sides. But I think adding a little bit of asymmetry to this will help it out. And I don't want too many of these, and I don't want them to be too small of a scale, because this is supposed to be sort of a molded toy, and I want that detail to kind of read. Okay, we'll come in here and maybe make this one a little bit more jagged up here as well. Okay, so we can start to add that detail. We can come in along the back and start to add some detail back here as well. Just adding that sort of cliff-like detail coming around. And so all this is happening on our sculpt layer. So if we don't like what we've done, we can just turn the visibility of that layer off, and we get back to our base geometry. Nothing has been baked in as far as the detail that we've added. We can also come in here and dial down the strength if it sticks out too far. So we can sort of change the power of that sculpt layer. Okay. We can also come in here and erase out of the sculpt layer. And so let's say I don't like that initial one that I did. I can come in here and erase this out erase this whole section out. You can see it's not getting rid of the sculpted detail that we had before. It's just getting rid of that rocky detail that I just added. Okay, so let's say I want to start over right up here on the abdomen with that. You can see I can erase that out. Now I can go back in, use Sculpt, and maybe I want it to be a little bit more jagged. So I can just vary my stroke a little bit more and make it a little bit more jagged. Come in here and create something like that. Okay, just making sure that I've got that sculpt layer selected. Can come in here and start to build that up. You get something like that. Okay, and you can see the sculpt layer here. Now you can have a bunch of different sculpt layers, and so you could separate, if you had a certain scale of rocky detail that you wanted to create, you could do that on one layer and then create maybe a smaller scale on another layer, or you could come in and just do it on the same layer. We can do the same thing up on the head, but if you do it on the head, I would encourage you to kind of change your scale a little bit. So change your brush size, dial it down a little, and we could come in here and start to add kind of some rocky detail coming across the face, and maybe coming up in here, and maybe something like that. And coming down the chin, coming across the front of the face. Just have some fun with it. Coming across the eye, around the top of the head. Okay, you can come in, and if you wanted to create something that was more kind of regular, you could come in and start to, make some patterns and things like that if you want to. Let's do the same thing on the arms. So I would just come in maybe along the length of it, and the pressure sensitivity lets us blend those right into the rest of the surface as we get towards the edge of our stroke. We can blend that right in. So we can come in, and if you want them to go the whole way, you can do that too. Again, not trying to create necessarily a realistic rock look, but a toy version of what kind of a rock surface might be molded into the plastic. Okay, so we want to get something like that. So just go across the rest of the model, adding that detail on a sculpt layer on your highest level. Okay, you can always go back in and erase it out. You can also mask that out, but that'll leave the detail. It just won't allow you to see anything from that group. So if you want to replace it, you'll have to erase it out or create a new layer as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and finish up this detail just at this level on this layer. And in the next lesson, let's add some higher frequency bumpy detail to the surface. In this lesson, we'll add some higher frequency detail to the skin. So we've got the large scale sort of rocky detail sculpted in using a sculpt layer. Let's use another sculpt layer to add another level of detail across the skin. So this is supposed to be plastic, so I don't want to get too detailed, but I do want to add a little bit of bumpiness to the surface. So let's begin by adding a new sculpt layer. Make sure we do have that layer selected. And then I'm going to use Sculpt, and let's get another stamp here to use. I'm going to get this stamp right here, this cliff face. And let's randomize this. Now you can see when we hit randomize, that just means when we stroke across the surface, it's going to randomize it based on either the rotation, the position left and right, the position up and down, the scaling, or the intensity. And so you can decide how much of that randomization occurs just by changing these little sliders. All right, so for the most part, it's just going to be changing the rotation and the position. It's not really going to be creating different scales of this. And so we have the strength, so a lot of times it's good to just kind of overshoot the strength a little bit because you can always dial down the strength of the layer itself. So let's kind of come across here, and I'm just going to add a little bit of that rocky detail, and I'll make the scale a little bit bigger. I'm going fairly light on it because I don't want to destroy sort of the cliff-like detail that I've already added. And so we'll just kind of come across and add that. And it's, again, very flexible because we're adding it to a layer. And so it's something that we can turn off or we can erase, and it won't destroy, as we're putting it in, it won't destroy the underlying data. So we could always go back to that default model if we wanted to. So come across here on the rest of the body and just kind of evenly distribute this detail. Let's add a little bit on the head. Kind of maybe scale that down a little bit because the head's going to be a little smaller. We'll come across here. And for the face, I don't really want it to be that intense, so I'll dial the strength down a little bit. And we're doing it without symmetry, so kind of you can do it either way, but doing without symmetry can kind of add a little bit more realism to it. Alternatively, though, it does take a little bit longer. So I'll just drop in a little bit of detail just to kind of break up those smoother areas. Okay, now we just have the kind of arms and legs to do. At this point, if you want to turn on symmetry, we can come in here and maybe speed things up a little bit. Just across the arms. I'll try to cover even, the spots underneath. And along the forearms and fingers. Yeah, we'll just kind of break that up a little bit. Now for the legs. All right. And let's finish up with the lower legs. I'm just kind of doing it very quickly here. Just kind of finish up. Okay. So that's one layer of this surface detail, right? So let's say we want to now add a different kind of detail, maybe just kind of a bumpiness. So what we can do is, again, to retain our flexibility, create a new sculpt layer. This time we'll change our stamp. Let's just get this first one. And I'm going to turn off symmetry. And now we can come in and just sort of add this general bumpiness. Okay. Get that sort of plastic surface texture. Okay, so I just want to do this across the entire surface. So let me pause the video just so you're not watching me paint the whole time, but I'm just going in and I'm just going to add this to the entire surface just on this sculpt layer. All right, so we'll call that good. I've just got a lot of these bumps across the surface. You can always come in and dial down the intensity of those bumps. Another thing that we can do here with our sculpt layers is to create groups. So we could create a new group and we could drop the kind of high-res skin bumps into that group. Okay, so then you could turn off all of that at once. And so you can start to organize things that way. Okay. I can also rename it, so I can call this skin bumps. And then you can start to organize things so you don't have just a big long list of sculpt layers in there. All right. You can also, if you wanted to, you could merge the data in that group together so it would go back into one group. All right. Once you get a couple of layers in there for the detail that you want on the surface of the model, let's take a look in the next lesson at creating a custom vector displacement map. So these maps that we've been using to get these really custom details, they're actually really good at getting displacement that doesn't rely just on height, but you can get undercuts and things like that. So we can actually create our own to create, let's see, some custom detail for up on the shoulder. So let's take a look at how we can do that in the next lesson.